The PowerPoint display you're about to see requires a short introduction. First, anyone who doesn't know who Ray Simpson and Karl Louis are might find it helpful to have a short biography. Karl is a prominent German collector, but is also a professional philatelist and is currently a managing director of Koren Fila, a major philatelic auction house in Zurich. He began to collect GB Victorian stamps in boyhood and is a major authority on these. Over more than 30 years, he has compiled a well-known card index system of significant Victorian stamps and covers, comprising something like 100,000 entries. And it's consulted regularly by major auction houses and expert bodies on the provenance of rare material. My achievements are much more modest. I too started collecting stamps as a boy and began taking a real interest in Victorian stamps more than 50 years ago. Over the years, I've moved through the gears and I've both displayed and exhibited these interesting stamps. My specialist interest has been in stamp separation, and in particular, the invention and development of perforation in Victorian Britain. With a colleague, I even wrote a book about it. In latter years, I've spent a lot of time researching and writing about stamps and stamp usage, the latter being a very neglected area. Through our mutual interests, Karl and I have been friends for many years, and we're both members and proud to be members of the Great Britain Philatelic Society. The second point I want to make is that some of you may not be familiar with the term mixed frankings. So any cover with different types of stamps could be classed as mixed franking. Stamps from different issues, machins with special issues or different printing methods, line engraved, surface printed, different reigns, Victoria, Edward VII, all qualify. Most of these mixed frankings are now so common that they're not really of any interest. But today we'll be concentrating on a specific group, which is of very special interest, and that is covers with two or more stamps that illustrate the transition from one issue to the next. As our interest is in the Victorian stamps of Great Britain, the presentation focuses on the key developments affecting the stamps issued between 1840 and 1902. All illustrated by relevant covers. Most of them are what we call gold standard covers, which show a stamp from one issue used together with its immediate successor. One final comment before the presentation begins. It was made for Virtual Stampex last month, and this is a repeat. All the stamps we show are very common, but most of the covers you will see with the stamps used together are either scarce or even very rare. Okay, well, Karl, are you going to tell us how you got really interested into mixed franking covers?
Yeah, it's a short story. When I started to build up my card index register, I found out that certain aspects in philately are much rarer than the price of the items would tell us. And I found out that mixed frankings are something highly interesting to collect. I started to do so, and I wondered that it was not so popular in Britain. So when I showed my collection some years ago, a few years ago, I showed it to a colleague of Koren Fila in Zurich, Greg Todd, and a British. I showed him my collection and he said, "Oh, Karl, this is nice, but a very typical German collection or a German way of collecting." So this is how I started to collect mixed frankings.
Great, Karl. Well, I remember we had a chat at Stampex and you said to me that these were very, very interesting and we ought to, I ought to write a book about it. You challenged me to try and find a particular cover where two very common British stamps Now, can you tell us which two very common British stamps you had in mind?
Yes, I remember very well. A few years ago, Ray, when we met at Stampex, I said, hey, now you have finished your book of the stamp perforations. You cannot sit at home, and so you should write another book. You remember?
I do.
You said, oh, Karl, what topic do you think? And I said, mixed frankings. And you said, well, I never thought about mixed frankings. And I said, I give you a challenge. And I said, you know the penny perforated stars. You know the penny red plate numbers, two absolutely common stamps. Not very easy to find one on cover. You can get here at Stampex hundreds, if not thousands, but find the two stamps together on one cover. You remember?
I do.
And what did you do?
Well, I looked around Stampex, and I hate to admit failure, but I couldn't find one. However, immediately after that talk, it was getting close to closing time on that day, and I went round the stalls. I thought I'd just have a little look, and I actually found quite an interesting one, and it had a penny Venetian red and a penny lilac on the same cover. And I thought, shall I buy that? If we're going to do something, I better understand these things. And so I hummed and hawed, and I eventually bought it. And now we've done all our work, I find it's one of only a handful of similar covers. So it's almost as good as the one you were talking about. So I think we'd better show these folk what the sort of covers we're talking about, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
At our presentation.
So this was a start.
Yeah, and you must start. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good. Do you think we should start our presentation to the topic?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So then, let us introduce to Victorian mixed ranking covers and to describe the topic we are talking about, and which we will gladly give answers to any questions later on. Covers bearing different types of stamps are described as mixed frankings. In our book, we are concentrating on a specific group of mixed frankings of special interest, those with two or more stamps that illustrate the transition from one issue to the next. This short PowerPoint display focuses on the Victorian stamps of Great Britain, which were issued between 1840 and 1902. All are illustrated by relevant covers. Most of them are what we call gold standard covers. A gold standard cover shows a stamp from one issue used together with its immediate successor of the same denomination. For example, a penny with another penny stamp. Okay, now the first item we are going to show you is a mixed ranking from the 1840 to 1841 transition. Security issues of the 1841 penny black and tuppence blue stamps quickly became obvious. Within weeks of issue, experiments began with more fugitive printing inks and an obliteration ink that was difficult to remove. Nobody could miss a change from the black to the red ink for the penny value. On screen, a typical example posted originally with the penny black. It was then redirected to the original addressee with the penny red. This mixed ranking is scarce, but not particularly rare. Thus, it is greatly sought after. Also, the unpopular 1840 Mulready postal stationery was quickly replaced by the penny pink and tuppence blue postal stationery in the spring of 1841. But one penny Mulreadys from the remaining stocks were often uprated with a single 1841 penny red, either to pay the 1 ounce rate or for redirection. Unusually, this redirected cover was redirected a second time, but unpaid, and charged another penny on delivery. So I think, Ray, here you take over because we're getting to the imperforate to perforated issues, and this is your topic, of course.
Okay, well, thank you, Karl. We'll carry on the story with the sort of remaining developments of the penny and tuppenny line engraved stamps that Karl has introduced us to. And the first development was the change from imperforate stamps to perforated stamps, which was actually a major development. And it was first seen on the British stamps in 1850. The 1850 stamps came from Archer's experimental perforated stamps. And they are pretty scarce on cover, but in mixed frankings with imperforate stamps like this are very rare. And this is one of only 7 recorded covers. And these were the very first stamps in the whole world to be perforated. We then move on to the officially perforated penny and tuppenny stamps, which were first issued in 1854. And quite a few imperforate and perforated frankings are recorded, but they are scarce. And the 1 penny imperf, 1 penny perf combination on screen is one of just 29 examples recorded. However, the tuppenny combination that follows is much scarcer, with only 11 examples recorded. Only 3 of those were posted in 1854, and the one on screen is one of them, with stamps paying the 4 pence or 2 ounce internal rate of postage. Now, many of the surviving imperforate, perforate mixed frankings involve combinations of the penny and tuppenny stamps, though with one exception, we really don't have much time today to go into all of that. But the exception is this March 1859 cover, which has a pair of imperforate tuppenny blues at the top. There's also an imperforate penny red at the bottom right, together with a perforated penny rose red. And together, these stamps pay the correct 6pence rate to India via Southampton. Now, explain it if you can. I can't. I move on now from the introduction of perforation to perforation changes that occurred between 1855 and 58. Now, don't get worried, because there were only 2 perforation gauges used on British postage stamps at this time. One was perforation 16, the other was perforation 14. When it all started, perforation 16 was the appropriate gauge, and that measurement is based upon the number of holes across the top and bottom of the stamp, 16 holes for perf 16. But the closeness of those perforation holes caused a problem. It caused damage to the components of the machines, and it interfered with productivity, and that was a no-no. So it was decided to switch to perforation 14, and the transition took place during 1855. So mixed franking perforations were inevitable, and both the tuppenny and the penny stamps were affected. The examples with the tuppenny stamps are rare, and so that's what we're going to concentrate on today. And the first of these examples, well, it just takes my breath away, because the central stamp is an imperforate tuppenny blue from plate 3, but it's flanked by perforated stamps, one from plate 5, perf 16, and the other from plate 6, perf 14. So to put this cover into context, there are only 8 other tuppenny blue covers with a mixture of Perf 16 and Perf 14 stamps. This one just has that slight added bonus of the imperforate. So, well, when everybody had just got used to Perf 14 as the new standard, Perf 16 made an unexpected comeback in 1857-58. It's now accepted that the priority being given to the manufacture of a new perforating machine resulted in delays to the routine servicing of the standard Perf 14 punch sets. And so they pressed the old 16 punch sets into action on a temporary basis. Now, the penny combination on screen is one of only 9 gold standard covers recorded. It's a shame one of the stamps is upside down, but I can't help that. However, the companion tuppenny blue cover is even rarer, because this is the only example so far known. Both stamps are from plate 6 and were used to pay the basic Fortance rate to France. Now, the final section on line engraved, and then I'm going to hand back to Karl, is the stars with plates. Now, that was the one he was talking about earlier on when he told me I wouldn't find one, and he was right. Now, how this came about is that from 1841 through to 1858, the design of the penny and tuppenny line engraved stamps had stars in the top corners and letters in the bottom corners. The stars were a kind of ornament. They weren't really stars, but we call them stars. But to combat fraud, the stamps were then redesigned with letters at the top and the bottom, and with plate numbers in the lattice work at the sides. This change was first made to the tuppenny stamps in 1858. Examples of the old and new stamps used together are rare, and this fourpenny internal postage cover from Shrewsbury to Warrington is one of the star items. Apart from this, only 4 others are recorded. And then, as we saw briefly, we'll go back to it, the slide now with the penny stamps on. And the issue of the penny stamps was delayed until 1864. Both the penny stars and plates exist in their billions, as Karl said at the beginning, but it's not easy to find a cover with both of them on together. Most mixed frankings featuring these stamps involve single copies. Just for the fun of it, we're showing you a registered book post label paying a 6pence rate, and it's a notable exception. To date, only 18 mixed frankings of the penny stamps have been recorded, though more probably exist somewhere. Karl, it's back to you now to take us on to other methods of printing and the covers that emanated from them.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So coming to the embossed issues and the surface printed issues in 1856, we had that the 1 shilling and the 6pence adhesive stamps were being replaced by surface printed stamps. And in consequence, mixed frankings of any of the embossed stamps with the surface printed stamps are quite rare, because the new 6pence surface printed stamps were not issued until late October 1856. Replacing the 6pence embossed, there was little opportunity only for them to be used together on one cover, which we can see here. 3 such gold standard 6pence embossed and 6pence surface printed covers, like this one here, have, to our knowledge, survived. Surface printed stamps issues with the corner letter changes. For unexplained reasons, the first surface printed stamps issued between 1855 and 1862 had no corner letters. Small white corner letters were added in 1862. More legible large white corner letters were introduced in 1865. And finally, there was a change to colored letters starting in 1873. These changes occurred over quite a long period. This resulted in many mixed frankings of old and new stamps used together. But it is really difficult to find old and new stamps of the same denomination used together in a mixed franking. The cover on screen is the only recorded example of the 1862 fourpence with small corner letters used with the 1865 fourpence large corner letters. This is followed by the sixpence small letters used with the sixpence large corner letters. Only 3 such comparable covers are recorded by us. The challenge continues with the transition from the white to colored corner letters. This group offers 2 more gold standard covers. This cover to Palermo in Sicily is with 2 3-pence stamps, well deserves the description of rare. That is followed by the fourpence value combination cover to Melbourne. Only 3 such examples of this white corner letters and colored corner letters are recorded. Getting to the surface printed stamps, design and color changes. This section begins with a cover that not only displays a change from white to colored letters, but also to a striking color change. It so happened that for the sixpence value, the color change and the change to colored letters coincided. Again, a very rare cover. I think, Ray, it's the only one we have recorded. And yeah, one of another gold standard. Ray, I think from here, I hand over again to you to the, we have one more, sorry.
You have one more, yeah.
One more, yeah, sorry. Forgive me. So this is the same of the color changes, which we just saw for the sixpence. We have also for the fourpence. And this is the change from the fourpence vermilion to the fourpence olive. And again, this is the only recorded example of this mixed franking. Ray, and you take over from here.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Karl. I'm in great danger of succumbing to the temptation of envy when I see those wonderful covers from which the participants in this seminar will realize that most of them don't belong to me. However, right, well, we move on then from that period effectively up to about 1880, and from 1880, pretty well everything began to change at a fairly rapid pace. And it's perhaps not most collected area of Victorian philately. However, there are some very interesting covers coming out of this period, and I'm starting with the Consolidated Contract issue of 1880 to 1884. Now, 40 years on from the penny black, new concerns about the security of the line engraved stamps prompted a change to surface printing with much more fugitive inks. And De La Rue acquired the contract for all the low value stamps. When I said consolidated contract, it simply meant all the low value stamps were being printed by De La Rue together with some certain postal stationery. Now, the penny red, as we see on this cover, was the first to be replaced. And its successor was the penny Venetian red. Now, on this cover, you get a very nice copy of the penny red plate on the left, and on the right, under the label, is a rather heavily cancelled penny Venetian red. But it's fitting that this cover is shown because not only are the two stamps used together, but the added bonus is that the penny red is from a plate that many people would have heard of, plate 225, the last and rarest of all the penny red plates. Now, it wasn't only the penny red that was replaced, but the other 3 values, the halfpenny, the penny halfpenny, and the twopenny, as De La Rue geared up to the additional workload. And all the other line engraved stamps are recorded used with stamps from the 1880 issue, but not generally with those of the same denomination. The only exception is the cover about to be shown with the old and new halfpenny stamps commercially used in a mixed franking. Now, I have to apologize for the state of the green halfpenny stamp, but these are both very, very common stamps, but this is the only recorded example of them being used in combination. So maybe you can go and look around all these Stampex stalls and see whether you can find another one. And if you do, let me know, because I'd be very interested. Right, well, we move on from the consolidated contract issue to the unified issue, another very boring title. But what that means is it was an administrative change brought about by a new Act of Parliament, which authorized the use of postage stamps for both postage and revenue purposes. Previously, they were separate. And certain existing revenue stamps could also, that will stop in a moment. It stopped now, good. I'll start again. What it meant was that both postage stamps were used for revenue purposes, and certain existing revenue stamps could also be used for postage. But for this to work across the board, new fugitive inks were required. And the first of the completely new unified stamps was the penny lilac, one of the commonest Victorian stamps in existence. But surprisingly, mixed frankings illustrating the transition from the penny Venetian red to the penny lilac are very scarce. And this was the cover that I went out and bought immediately after talking to Karl. So you really have it by virtue of his prompting me to start looking for these things. Now, the stamps produced in the 1880s include the 1884 lilac and green issue, and one that collectors don't seem to like very much. And really, we've got nothing to show you here, because although there are mixed frankings of the lilac and green with other non-contemporary stamps, they're pretty scarce, and there are no same denomination issues with either the Victorian stamps or anything that preceded the issue. So it's perhaps an area that might repay a bit of diligent exploration. Right, well, finishing post now in sight, because we move on to the last of the Victorian issues, the Jubilee issue. And it was the deficiencies of that lilac and green issue that quickly led to a rethink and to their replacement in less than 3 years. The Jubilee issue that replaced them survived largely intact for 14 years. There were 2 additions to the original range, the fourpenny halfpenny and the tenpence, and a couple of colour changes to the halfpenny and to the shilling. Most of the values survived until 1902, until the King Edward VII replacements were ready. And this cover showing the colour change for the halfpenny from the original vermilion on the right to the blue-green on the left is actually rather less common than I certainly thought, and is worth searching for. There are a few covers recorded, some of which are most distinctly philatelic, but it probably means that they're underrepresented, and maybe you'll be fortunate enough to find examples as you look around. And finally, I'm going to just finish with mixed reign frankings, Queen Victoria and King Edward VII. I'm only going to show one. The mixed reign frankings from that period provide promising opportunities for future study, because it wasn't until the late spring of 1902 that the King Edward VII stamps finally replaced all their Victorian predecessors. So mixed frankings were inevitable. And amongst the lower values, interesting covers are undoubtedly there to be found. we're aware of covers, the combination of Queen Victoria and King Edward VII for the halfpenny, for the penny, this is the penny here, and for twopenny halfpenny stamps. Of course, technically, that penny wasn't a Jubilee issue. It came out before, but it served right the way through. So it's an interesting combination. And there may well be more to be found, although we've only found 5 examples so far. So again, I think opportunities may exist. Right, well, this presentation, which is really now at its end, is just a basic introduction to the world of mixed frankings. There are, of course, all sorts of variations on the theme that we've presented, and we explore the subject much more thoroughly in the book that we've just produced, which, strangely enough, happens to be on your screen. We hope, however, that the subject has been one of interest, entertainment, and information, and that it may have encouraged you to explore the possibilities more deeply. So thank you for your presence and thank you for your patience. But before I go, I just want to say thank you to Andre Schneider, who's a colleague and friend of Karl, who has both designed and produced this PowerPoint presentation. I think he's done an excellent job, and I hope you agree. So this presentation was just a basic introduction to the world of mixed frankings. The slideshow itself was designed and managed by Karl's talented work colleague, Andre Schneider, who deserves our thanks. We hope you found it interesting and enjoyable, and that it may have encouraged you to explore the possibilities more deeply. Thank you for tuning in. Now, this is just, of course, a taster of the delights to be found in mixed frankings. Karl and I explore the subject more thoroughly in a book we've just produced. It provides an accessible history of the key developments of postage stamps during Queen Victoria's reign, with details and valuations of all mixed covers so far recorded, more than 400 of which are illustrated. The perfect Christmas gift, and details of how to get hold of it are perhaps partly on the screen, but I'm sure that if there's anybody really interested and wants to know more, you can be put in touch with me by All About Stamps. Now, I mentioned earlier that Karl and I are both members of the Great Britain Philatelic Society, and joining that society was one of the best philatelic decisions I ever made. And I'd encourage anyone interested in GB stamps to give the matter serious consideration. You won't regret it. Access to the full website is worth the annual subscription alone, and that's only the start. Among the benefits of membership of the GB Journal and newsletter 6 times a year, displays and presentations, including online, a website that includes resources, postal rates, etc., that is second to none. See the website for low subscription and the application form. All new members receive the November-December issues free from www.gbps.org.uk.